Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Jason's Take On podcast series, talking about all things customers, customer success, and more. We've got myself, Jason Noble, over here in London in the UK, gearing up for summer, and my partner in crime, Mr. Whitehead, over in the US, who's already on his summer holidays. Say hey, Jason.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Today, we're going to talk about something that I think we're beginning to see more and more traction on this topic, a lot more interest. I know, Jason, you've been in a number of roundtables recently where this topic's come up. It's something that a lot of startups have these conversations as they move to more mature organizations with more customers. It is about scaling customer success. So we're going to go through the normal format, kind of some of the challenges we've seen, some of our thoughts on it, the feedback we've seen, and then some of the ideas that we've had in the different roles and organizations we've had as well. So normal format, we're aiming for about 25-minute podcast. This is just the two Jasons. There are no guests on this one. We've got some other guest ones coming up. Do keep an eye out on our LinkedIn page and our Twitter. And please do, if you've got any ideas for podcasts, any ideas for conversations or guests that you'd like us to have on, do let us know. As before, I'm Jason Noble, based here in the UK. Been around in the customer success world for quite some time now. Before it was called customer success, I think is quite common. A lot of us have been there, but currently with Vinley, a US-based mobility technology startup organization, heading up their European and global customer success orgs. Quick intro for you, Jace.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Whitehead, based in the Washington, D.C. area, and I am co-founder of Success Chain with my partners in crime, Sue Abbott Moore and Kelly Lucas. We're offering up a variety of customer success focused coaching and consulting and training services. So all kinds of great things, and love working with teams small and large from across the globe. It's been really great fun. And I too have been in this space since long before it was customer success, and spent a lot of time working hands-on doing technology implementations and doing a lot of change management and user adoption of technology, really working hands-on and in-house to get people to use systems and prove the value. So it's really great fun to be on both sides of the fence here and see how the industry has matured.
I think it's really cool, and I'm going to keep bugging you to let's do a recording of Success Chain, because I think it's going to be a really interesting episode to see what you guys are doing.
We will do it. It'll be a lot of fun.
Excellent. As always, guys, we have a bold challenge question, so something for you as our listeners to think about, and we'd love your feedback on this. What have you done? And the bold challenge question today is, what bold actions can you take to quickly scale your customer success program while still maintaining the high levels of customer satisfaction, customer experience, and success that you need to do? So have a think about that. Please do let us know. Jason, let me push the very first question over to you, sir. So why are we talking about this? Why is this important?
I think as the customer success industry is expanding, people are realizing in the early days, it was all about how do we just retain our customers? What do we need to do? And we'll try anything to get there. And now people are realizing and putting in processes and structures like, oh, we need to actually be able to do this at scale. It's going to keep key to our growth as a vendor. It's key to our customers getting the success that they want. So how do we really replicate ourselves? And people are learning that you can't just keep throwing bodies at this. That doesn't work. So we need to figure out what does work, what doesn't work, and how do we continue to really take this to the next level, mature our organizations, and see where we need to go, so that we get the results that we want. What's your take, Jason?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Big one is it's about maturity. As businesses start their customer, and it can be business maturity, company maturity, but also customer success maturity. We all start from somewhere, but as you grow, how do we grow? How do we grow effectively? How do we make sure that we're still delivering value and outcomes for our customers? And I think it's something that every customer success organization deals with this. There's always a level of growth and scalability that they're going through. And I think it is absolutely tied to your maturity. And then not just about, well, yes, we need to scale, but it's about what do we do? How do we do this? And how do we do this to be most effective?
And I think to your point too, with maturity, we're also learning that we've done a lot of stuff that we don't need to do, or that doesn't work, or works some, but doesn't really have the return that we want. So let's figure out how we can prioritize what has the biggest impact for the least amount of effort. Yeah. Jason, let me ask you this. How does scaling impact your success strategy and your vision? And this is some big changes here we're talking about.
There's huge changes. And I like the way you've talked about your experience doing change management earlier, because it's critical to this. And this is all about how do we change as we grow and scale. And I think your vision strategy, they're not set in stone. As you grow and scale, the number of customers you have, the team size, the revenues you've got coming in, the number of products, any complexity around that grows and changes, so does your vision and strategy. And you have to have a really solid ability to look at change management here. I think your core principles as to why we're doing what we're doing remain the same, but you've got to have that flexibility to change kind of maybe the goals for this year, make them flexible, change what we're trying to do over 5 years as we grow. Where are we today? Where do we want to get to? And how does scalability come into that? And I think some of the other areas that scaling can help you do. I mean, scaling absolutely is about bringing more business in, more customers in. It may be new market segments, new geographies you're looking at. There may be new products you're building out. And I think that all brings about a level of complexity, as we said earlier on, that I think is really critical here. Do you have any thoughts for you, Jason? I mean, how else do you see it impacting kind of strategy and vision?
You know, I think the other piece too is, coming back to the maturity piece, is we're seeing more and more organizations offering customer success, and all of our customers are experiencing different flavors from multiple vendors of this is what success looks like from vendor A, and this is what it looks like from vendor B. And it comes back to that whole point of, as a vendor, you need to be offering competitive services. You need to be standing out and differentiating on the value of your customer success service. That means not only do you have to really be able to deliver something that makes an impact, but you've got to be able to do it consistently, and otherwise you really can't deliver what your customers are expecting. So I think there's a competitive nature to this as well too that comes in.
I think that consistency as well is super important, because when you start doing customer success, you start delivering there. Your customers have not a perception, but there's a certain expectation they've got as how you're delivering this, and being consistent and making sure that you're explaining to your customers what's changing, why it's changing is important, because there can be disruption from them. If the contacts that they deal with, if the processes are changing, they need to know. What then, so a question back for you again, Jason, here. What does scaling mean for your own team? So not just about your customers, but what about your internal team? And that could be your customer success team, but also other stakeholders in your business. What does it mean for them?
I think it means a lot of change. There's going to be a lot of shifting around of responsibilities, and some people have greater responsibility than before. Some people will spend a lot of time doing new activities that they didn't do before, and having to let go of some of the things that they've done in the past, because you can't continue to do the same things you did before if you're going to have time and capacity to do something new. So there's going to be a lot of shifting around. And I think it really will mean you'll have to change your structure, because in my mind, scaling really comes down to how do you deliver the type of outcome or service that you want in a different way, and do it in a way that's more cost effective and time effective as well. And that's going to require some use of technology. It's going to require some providing consumable content that customers can use themselves, self-service, self-success piece. And ultimately, it's about freeing things up. So there's going to be a lot of shifts, I think. But I think also on the bright side, with changes like this, there comes a lot of career growth and opportunities for folks, which is a great thing. Learning, if you have a team that's building out new success content that you're going to use in automated tools or platforms, or new product content that customers can self-service with, whatever it may be, or coming up with new ways to look at data and figure out how can we automate some things, or how do we do different trigger points. There's a lot of new roles, new skills that will be developed and be in demand, and that presents a lot of growth for folks. Yeah. What about you? What are your thoughts on what it means for your team?
I think that career growth one is really exciting, because in many times, customer success organizations start with everyone being very reactive, everyone doing everything, which is exciting. It's fun to do. It's challenging. But at the same time, you find that you're being inconsistent as to how you're dealing with your customers. You might not know everything. That team growth, the more mature team structure, I think is so important. And I, in multiple roles in my career, have seen that work really well. There was one organization I worked at where everyone was just a customer success champion, as they called them. Everyone doing everything from implementation to training to support. When I came in there, we put in place some really solid structure, built out an implementation team, actually a customer success ops team or a customer ops team. And I think people jumped at the chance to do this. They were frustrated with some of the existing challenges, struggles they were having. And it was, to your point, career growth was exactly what they wanted to do. And I've seen a number of these people go on and do roles that are now full-time, these other roles we moved into. So I think it can be very successful. So I think the career growth thing is really key. The other thing you've got to consider is, what does it mean for other teams internally? You've got to make sure your sales team understand the structure, your product team, your engineering team, and your support team, and how the different interactions and interfaces might change with you.
No, I think that's really key. And we're hearing more and more from different organizations as well. I think related to this too is like specialized CS roles. So more organizations we have an onboarding team, we have our escalation team, whatever it may be, where it needs to go, but really specializing there. I think it's been very interesting for a lot of folks of where we want to go. So I think I find that fascinating. And one of the other things that we've talked about is how many CS professionals, they love to over deliver and they love to provide best white glove service to absolutely everyone. And they find it really hard to say, oh, you're our tier 3 customer. You don't get this. We can't deliver the service to you, but we can if you're a tier 1 customer. And I think part of the scaling process is getting people to let go and stop over delivering and stop performing some of the services that they would like to do and that customers would love to have for free, but it's just not effective or affordable to do it that way.
We've talked about this kind of idea of over delivering before, and I think it's something that we want our customers to be successful, and quite often we have to handhold them a bit more than normal, but it's too easy to consistently overstep the mark. And I think it's so important to pull back and to realize that it's okay to pull back and it's the right thing to do, but you've got to make sure that you message that correctly to your customers.
Absolutely.
And the teams as well.
And your team. And I think where a lot of frontline CSM struggles, they are right in that they're doing a great service for their individual customer that they're helping, but there's an opportunity cost involved.
Yep.
And there's a lot of people and a lot of other customers that don't get what they need because of this choice.
Absolutely.
And trying to get them in a mindset where we do something different.
Yeah.
So let's flip this around, Jason, then. What does the scaling mean for your customers? We talked about the teams. What's the impact on customers?
I think generally it's a very positive impact. There's a reason you're doing this. It's all about delivering better value or more value and better and more outcome. And I think most customers understand the need to do this. They understand that there might be some pain points along the way. What they might not have sometimes is patience. If you're going through these big changes, some of the contacts are changing, they deal with some of the processes, it might impact them. So you've got to think about that very carefully. How do we do this without impacting our customers? I think we talked about it earlier on, but the key really for me is all about standardization and consistency. So we've got to make sure that as we grow, we can deliver that right level of service. Maybe it's a white glove service, maybe it's a more self-service option, but we've got to be consistent with what that customer wants. So if we can do it for one customer, we need to do it for 2, for 3, for 4. So that standardization is really critical, particularly when it comes to what are the outcomes we're delivering, what's the experience, and you've got to look at the segmentation with your sales team as to how you deliver, not just about how they sell. I think one of the other things, and again, I've seen this several times, is particularly as you're going from a relatively small team and small number of customers, is that suddenly your customers might not be dealing with a dedicated person, a CSM, and having a one-to-one relationship. It might be more self-service. It might be a more team-based approach. It might be a broader thing where there's lots of different people they can speak to, or it might be that you're doing a very white glove service, doing support, doing training for them, and now there's someone else. You're still there. Your team's still there as the key contact to help facilitate any of the conversations, but you've got to make sure you explain to your customer the benefits of doing it, why you're doing it, what it means for them, and how you'll go through that transition period. I think the other key thing it means is as we grow, inevitably, there are some additional services, there's additional products we can offer, be it technology products or be it services like training, like professional services. So there's also the potential for us to deliver more value to our customers. And I think that's a real sell. The reason why we're growing and scaling our services is so that we can get better at it and offer you better value, better products. And I think they're some of the really key things. This then brings us on to a really good question now. So we've talked about why we're scaling, what it means for our customers, what it means for us internally, but how do you scale? And I'm going to throw this one back to you, Jason, but what are some of the approaches you need, and what about tools and technology? How can that help you scale?
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge for a lot of folks, and there's no one right way to do it, but ultimately it comes down to what is the work that we can that doesn't need to be done, that's no longer necessary? What are the things we can automate and make it available through other tools? And I think there's also that, and what are the ways that we can empower customers to achieve success on their own more? And some might say, oh, you're just pushing work off on your customers. No, we're enabling customers to do what they need to be doing themselves anyway, because a lot of the success issues that customers face are really internal to their organization, and how do we help them through that? So I think there's a variety of things. One, you have to look at what is the structure we need in place and what's the infrastructure that we need in place to help make this happen. And there's going to be tools and platforms and things like that. I think there's going to be a certain amount of what's the content that people need, whether it's content about our product, content about how to achieve success and derive change and adoption on your own. We've heard folks like Dave Jackson talk about product-led customer success. What are the things we can put within our product to help our customers achieve success? And I think it's all the above approach on this. but really coming in to say, what is it that we can build once and reuse over and over again that will make everyone successful? And I think related to that too is, where do we need some standardized playbooks? Where do we need to have a clear, even like a racing matrix with our customers and their journey map? Here's what we do, here's what you do, here's how this all comes about. And really just being very clear with and intentional about what are the steps, what are the processes that we take internally, what are the steps our customers need to take internally, and where do we work together with them? And obviously that has implications for your structure, the skills that you need, everything else to make sure, how do we free up time to create this content or build out these playbooks and analyze what's working and then train people up. What else would you throw in there when it comes to scaling?
I think some of the things you've got to start looking at is tooling and technology. We talked about the idea of customer ops before, but someone in your team that's effectively focused on processes and operations and the data rather than everybody doing it, and build that standardization there. And you've got to look at tools like, what analytics are you doing? What level of reporting? How do you bring in standardized workflows for customers, and inevitably start looking at the likes of a real customer success management platform, not just spreadsheets where we might start with. I think the other thing you've got to start looking at is creating some standardized playbooks from everything from onboarding, for training, for renewals, for upsells, but have playbooks that work across the team with defined tasks and calls to action so that everyone knows what good looks like and what best practice looks like. And I think there's some really cool things. And I think the other thing you do is, as you grow the structure of your team, you start defining your typical racing matrix, a role, who's responsible for it, who's accountable, etc. I do know the C&I, but I'm just going to say it. But just to bring that structure in, and just so that people know who's doing what, why they're doing it, so that I think you've got to build out the structure around job roles and specifications a lot more. I think there's some of the really key things that I'd look at doing.
And I think part of it too, if you want to be really bold, is take a fundamental look of where are customers struggling to achieve success on their own. Is it specific to our product? And sometimes there's some product pieces there, and that's part of it. But I think more times than not, it's that most customers that I've seen struggle with getting value from any technology, not just necessarily one platform. And they struggle with, how do they drive adoption? How do they get people to use technology differently in their organization? And I think at a more fundamental level, if vendors can help customers build their own capacity to drive change, to drive adoption, to drive success with the technology, those are skills that may transfer to other platforms as well too. But that's what's going to eliminate the demand. And I think people are always talking about, how do we meet the service we need to deliver? No one's really talking about, how do we reduce demand from our customers, which is you build your own customers' capacity, which very progressive thought there, and very different approach. But I
think it's really exciting now, because it is, like you say, sorry for interrupting, Jess, but it's very different. We're trying to change our customers, not just give them a tool that they can use for one thing, but we're trying to change the way that they work and think about this.
When I go into an organization that's implementing technology, when I'm doing my user adoption projects, one of the first questions I ask is, tell me about your typical system here. What % of value do you think you're getting from it? What % of full and effective adoption do you have? And typically people say, we're probably using about 10% of the capacity here. We're probably getting about 10% of the value from this tool that we could. And yet they don't really do anything to get more value out of their existing tools. They look for new ones. And what's also fascinating is, when I look at some of the business cases people put together to justify a purchase, I look at the numbers here. I'm like, okay, the numbers that you're here expecting in terms of value and return, you're assuming 100% full and effective user adoption. What in the history of your organization makes you think that's going to happen? You just told me that it's 10% here. Let's adjust here and say, oh, if we put even a fraction more effort and resources into driving adoption after the technology is live and getting value from it, our results would be 10-fold, 20-fold, 50-fold, whatever it may be. And yet folks just really look at justifying the purchase of the technology, not about how they're going to get value out of it. Which is fascinating to me. So let me ask you this, though, as we're moving down off that little side train here. What do you need to scale your CS delivery? And when do you need to do it, I guess?
I think that, what do you need? I think you need to look at your team. You've got to have the vision. You've got to have kind of the buy-in from your stakeholders internally. Quite often you've got to have budget. If you're growing, you need the budget for it. And this is all about growth. I think the when you need to do it is a really interesting question. For me, the when is when you go from customer 1 to number 2. And it really is, because you're taking what you've done from that first customer, building on it, showing what worked, what didn't work, you're looking at what needs to change, stopping doing things that we didn't like before. But it's all about that second customer. And then it goes to customer 3, and you learn from each of them. I think it could also be when you look at different segments that we're doing, not just dealing with, say, a certain geography or certain size of customer, we may be moving into different segments. Another when could be when you're increasing your product portfolio. Maybe to start with, you had one relatively more simple product, but you're adding complexity to it, or you're growing that product suite.
Yep.
It could also be as you grow as a business, so you're seeing a massive demand on the sales side. You've got a massive shift in revenue. The size of deals increase, so you need to look at how you scale. And I think that it really, what it boils down to is when there's really been a significant change towards growth. So right. Anything where there's an underlying growth within your business is when you need to look at scale. And it goes, we're talking about customer success, but clearly scale works across everything. You need to look at your finance, your support, product, your engineering. And too often the answer to scaling that a lot of people think we need to do is just throw more people at it, hire more resources. But you've got to look at your typical triangle: people, tools, and processes. And you cannot just scale one of them. You've got to scale all three of them. And for me, you want to start with the processes, because you can then think about the tools, you can think about the team side of it. So I think there's some of the really key things. I think one of the challenges you've got, Jason, I'll give you a question on this, is that we've talked through how we scale, when do we scale. There's clearly a period where we've got to help our customers understand what's going to happen, and there's a need to change. But how do you manage your customers' expectations, and how do you manage the transition going from low level of maturity to more maturity? And particularly, you talked earlier on about high touch and self-service, but what about if you've got customers that like that white glove treatment? That's what they've always had because they've been customer number one, and suddenly you're shifting to now a more of a low touch and medium level touch model. How do you help customers manage that transition?
Yeah, and nobody likes to have stuff taken away from them, and nobody likes to have to pay for something that used to be free. But the reality is, I think that it often will come to that at some point. So how you do that is critical. But I think a couple things come to mind is really think through what does that long-term transition look like, and how you explain it to customers directly and confidently. And they're resource constrained themselves, and they have customers, and they know how difficult this can be, that they're like, okay, this is just what we have to do. So a few things I've seen is saying to, especially like the large customers that are currently white glove, if we're changing our model, here's what it's going to look like. And for the next year, you're grandfathered in at this rate, but after a year, then you either need to pay for this service, or we're going to start to transition you down. Or over this period, we're going to be implementing new procedures as well. I remember years ago, I was working internally at a Fortune 100 company, and we were rolling out an e-serve functionality for the first time, and customers would start to come over a portal and put in a ticket. Things that we all expect now, but back then it was revolutionary. They were used to just picking up the phone and having a white glove service. And we explained to them that, no, we have to transition to this, but here are the benefits that you will get. You'll be able to see the history consistently, and you'll actually get faster close times. And they were a bit upset because we asked for 5 or 6 pieces of information right up front that they never had to provide before. And they're like, this takes so long. We're like, yes, but we're also removing 5 iterations of process here. So your total close time will be much faster, and you'll get a much better result. And as they started to see that, oh, okay, we get it. So I think being able to explain to your customer why you're making these changes, how it will impact them, and then where they will get some benefits, even if they are losing some services that they didn't have before. If you can show them what's in it for them in a different way, that goes a long way. But I think it's also, you've got to be clear and consistent in the communications. And this is the new way we're doing business. We understand what we used to do, and we'd love to be able to continue that, but it's not possible. But here's what we can do, and here's what we think you'll like about it. Let's give it a whirl. And most customers will make the transition with you. And occasionally I think you might lose 1 or 2, but if you're losing a customer because of this transition, there's a bigger issue at play. But what about you? How you've had to deal with customers a lot and go through different transitions and changes of service level. What have you seen?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is it can be painful. It can be challenging. And you said there, but the communications are critical. You've got to explain to customers why you're doing it, when you're doing it, and not just tell them on the day, but there's a campaign, there's a communications campaign. And for me, that's the biggest thing, is to make sure you're explaining to your customers why it's not going to impact them adversely, and what they're going to get from it, why you're doing it. And when I've done that and done it, I think your customers all come out on side. They all know what you're trying to do. And any difficult transitions, if you're changing processes that are going to impact them, if you're changing contacts, they don't worry about it so much as long as you're explaining with it. So for me, it's all about the communication. This isn't something that's easy. It can be very difficult, as you've said, but the communication is really the key thing.
Yeah. And I think if you have a customer customer advisory group where you've done the surveys with your customers, really showing that we're doing this in response to what you told us. This is what you said you want, we're listening, and here's how we're taking action. And I think also when you have, if you have the tools in place to capture data, being able to show them 6 months after the transition or a year after the transition, look at all these great numbers that we can show about how you're better served because of this transition. That goes a long way to restoring some faith in peace as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. So Jason, when you do scale, what do you stop doing? And what do you keep doing? And what new things do you start?
I like this as a question because I think this is one of the really good things. What do you stop? What do you start? And what do you continue doing? And I think one of the easy things to say is I think you stop doing everything. Quite often when we start in customer success, we are purely reactive. If a customer says jump, we say how high. And it goes back to that same about over delivering. So you stop doing everything. You've now got a better team structure. Who should do what? And I think what you've then got to start doing is you've got to start making sure that you're pointing the customer in the right direction. Your customers are still going to ask you, call you, contact you and ask you for X when it's not about you delivering it. So you've got to start letting them know what the right conversations are and who they need to speak to and what the right processes are. And I think that's really important. I think the other things that you need to start doing, and we talked about earlier on, is kind of standardization of your playbooks, making sure you've got those. You might not have any, but make sure your team understand those, make sure you've got those calls to action, make sure you train your team on those. And I think that consistency is critical. So once you've got the processes, your playbooks, you know what good looks like, but make sure your team will understand it. So start selling those playbooks and processes. Right. That's really important. I think what you've got to keep doing, it becomes harder when you've not got that one-to-one relationship, but you've really still got to know your customer and make sure you're still understanding what they do, understanding their own challenges, understanding where you fit into the life cycle, understand how you're impacting their outcomes, but make sure you still know your customers and that information is shared internally. Don't just keep it in your notepad in your head, but make sure you're documenting it, store it in your CSM platform, for example. And I think the other thing you've got to keep on doing and probably accelerate is delivering value and outcomes. This is why we're scaling. This is what we're telling our customers. This is the message why we're doing it. So you've got to continue driving that message that these are going to be the benefits for you and make sure you document and show them that. And I think that's really important. It is, we're effectively changing how we're working here as we're scaling. We're also changing how other teams internally work, our teams work, but also our customers. And I think, as you said before, Jace, that the biggest thing is around clear and consistent communications. And I think you can't undersell the need for doing that.
Yeah. And one of the things also that we talk about a lot with Success Chain is the idea of how do you get your customers on board from the very beginning with the idea of we're working towards mutual success. We need to make you successful as a customer, but we also have to be successful as a vendor. And let's talk about both of our mutual responsibilities, our mutual commitments to this, and what are the steps and processes we need to do, and how we're going to hold each other accountable through this process. And I think that a lot of CS organizations skip over this expectation setting and reinforcement all the way through. Oh no, this has to work for both of us, and let's talk about how we get there. Yeah. And I think, especially when scaling, you've got to be really tight with customers and forge some really strong agreements of what they need and what you deliver and what they have to do themselves. And I think when you can get there, that helps a lot.
You've got to manage those expectations, don't you? Like you said, it's not just about doing it and letting it happen. You've got to let them know what's going to happen, why it's changing. Yeah. Let me one last question here, Jess, before we wrap up. But what new skills and even team members do you need to help you scale? And how does scaling your customer success team impact overall staffing and headcount?
Yeah, this is one of those, I think, obviously will vary based on your organization, but I think there's some things you can assume that you will need. One is you will need skills to be able to create the tools and content and materials that customers need to drive self-success. So people who can write, people who can digest information, put it into usable formats, maybe it's videos, maybe it's something else. You're going to need to create and maintain accurate content that helps people and figure out the right way to deliver that. As you go in there, like that's not a skill that everyone has. And then you get some people who are really good at building relationships and really good on the phone and do other things. That may not be the skill that you need to create some of the scalable content as well. You'll probably need different parts of your team too. You mentioned before CS ops and how do we put in place processes and structures and tools. You're gonna need someone who can do all that. Increasingly, we're finding that people need a CS data analyst on their team and really getting into some of those areas there. So I think there's gonna be a lot of changes there, but ultimately I think what it comes down to is that you'll probably need some more specialized areas as well. to really get things moving. The exciting thing is I think there's some opportunities here to develop new skills and a lot of career growth for folks if you can do that. And so I think for an organization looking to do this, one, it's going to be how do we build these skills? How do we reallocate our team and restructure them? And then if necessary, how do we recruit new people? And it's amazing how hard it is right now for CS teams to find really qualified people to come in and do the work. So I think it's going to be how do we build more than how do we go out and find it in the market, because it's increasingly harder to find. But what else would you add to that? What skills and things do you see being needed?
I think one of the key things for me is you don't be blinkered. I think you're going to need new roles, new skills that you might not have known before. The example I gave earlier on about someone moving into CS Ops, this was at a time when CS Ops didn't really exist. Mm-hmm. But this person just didn't like contacting customers. They wanted a more BA type role, an operational role. And it made sense for us then as we were implementing customer success platforms, building out standardization. It made sense. So I think you've really got to go into this with your eyes open, look at all different opportunities and ideas and work with your team on this. And I think you've got to also be open to suggestions and ideas that might come from your team.
So I think that's pretty much everything that we've covered here in the time that we have. I think scaling is an exciting area. It's going to be where a lot of focus is going forward. Any closing thoughts before we get to our bold question?
I think, like you say, Jace, this is something that I know this has come up in lots of the roundtables you've done recently. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of other podcast recording with a lot of great leaders out there that people are talking about this, and it's something that every business comes up. So I think it's a very exciting topic. It's taken us a while to get to talk about it, but I think it's something that I have no doubt that we'll talk about again.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And before we go, we just want to recap our bold question here. And that is, what bold actions can you take to quickly scale your CS program while maintaining high levels of customer satisfaction and success? We'd love to know what you come up with. So please contact us on social media, share on LinkedIn, tag us. We'd love to hear your thoughts and hear what you guys are doing. And if you have other great suggestions, let us know. So from Washington, D.C., I'm Jason Whitehead. Thank you so much for joining us.
And from London, I'm Jason Noble. Thank you very much, guys. We really enjoyed this session.
Great. Bye now.